Hello, hello, hello. This is Attorney Mike Grevlin coming to you from Chicago. As usual, I've got Flamingo number 4 with me. Go ahead and say it.
Welcome to Law Talk with Mike.
All right, I'll be on when they come back. I thought that was too fun. I just wanted to do that intro.
Okay, we're ready.
Let's do this thing. Where's my goat? Someone stole my goat. Is this thing on? Exactly.
Stay out of Fulton County. Sorry, the only reason you're going to come to Fulton County is court or to see your lawyer. Not even get gas. Can't even stop at Chick-fil-A.
I do have a question.
Who's next?
Is the jury, have they been summoned?
Why don't we wait?
I do want to ask this question of plaintiff's counsel.
I didn't see that except a little bit of the end. It looks like Chief Spread Eagle was not doing any better.
Because if they are, I'm going to spend more time with this witness.
We're not planning on it, so.
Okay, that will, I'm going to rely on that and shorten my testimony.
Okay.
You don't have testimony. Learn law before you show up in court, please. It's embarrassing. Oh, no. 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 I won't let that happen. Thank you. That's far too kind.
Thank you. Mr. Owens, you may proceed.
Thank you.
Who's a witness? Oh, I'm so excited. It's still
If your
hurt.
dad told the doctor 3 weeks before
Oh, God.
the ski collision that he was preoccupied with paperwork and cleaning things out and not doing things he enjoyed doing that he used to do. Do you have any insights on that?
I do not.
Did you personally observe it?
I did not.
And how long had it been since you saw your dad prior? We said 3 months after the ski collision, but I'm not sure I asked you. How many months prior had you seen him?
I expect that we would have saw him either over the Christmas holiday
Okay.
or perhaps Thanksgiving. We usually did one or the other.
All right. So where the accident was in May, it would have been 5 or 6
Accident
months.
was in February.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm thinking it would have been
a couple months.
2 months, 3 months.
Gotcha. Was your dad sort of a scary driver before the ski collision?
We're
I
not
think I
perfect.
mentioned
But
he was a multitasker, so he
This is
did
bad.
more things in the car than I wanted my teen drivers to witness.
This is the first time I've ever seen this, but not just texting, but he would actually read a book while driving on the interstate freeway. Is that true?
I'd heard that rumor, like back when we were children,
From your
on a
sister?
straight stretch. I think that was something that,
From your sister?
yeah,
That's bad judgment, isn't it? To actually read a book?
I wouldn't recommend it.
Sustained.
seriously,
Well, do you think that was bad judgment if your dad was reading
I
a
think
book?
everything you've done
Driving-
is bad judgment,
You just
Mr. Attorney.
It's
Sustained.
it's a different
Settle
question.
down.
Go ahead and move on, counsel.
Thanks.
Settle down, spread eagle. You're losing.
All right. Your dad, our experts have actually compared brain imaging before the collision and brain imaging after the collision.
It would be
And have
fair to
made
say.
various conclusions. I take it you don't know anything about that.
No advanced degrees in neuropsychology
All
or
right. And then your dad really received all of his health care at the VA. Is that accurate?
I think his primary care provider, he uses the VA.
I'm talking like lots of medical care and lots of specialties. Are you aware of that?
Like I said, I think he really values his health and has always, had those checkups and would not surprise me.
So pre-collision, like a lot of medical records.
I think there's a continuity there that runs his whole life, before accident, after accident.
So I'm waiting for a yes on any of these.
Yes.
Thanks. Okay. And they knew him best. Fair enough. The VA people.
As opposed to who?
I think it depends on if you have longevity with your primary care provider. And sometimes with the VA, there's a lot of turnaround. They don't always stay a long time.
Do you know that he actually did have a long-term relationship with his primary care provider at the VA before this incident?
I don't know whether he did or not. I would be hopeful that he did.
Margaret Rasmussen. Do you know that name? Maybe I'm misstating it. Never mind. Don't worry. Okay. Then, so does this surprise you that your dad would go?
Never mind
to
my
the
sleazy
VA and say,
innuendos.
I want to be checked out. I want my thinking to be checked out. Did you ever hear him do that?
No, I did not.
Or that he had done that. That's how I should have said it.
I was not aware. I do
Okay.
know that he had follow-ups and healthcare visits. Yes.
Did he ever tell you that he had had 3 neuropsych assessments at the VA through his current treating providers?
Pre-collision?
No, I did not mean to switch on you. Thank
Okay.
you. That's a good clarification. So like 1 month after, 1 year after, 1 and 3 months after, that kind of thing.
I knew that he was having follow-ups because he was really worried about his mental state. So I haven't seen the medical records, but that seems, if that's what his medical record says.
And did you ever remember hearing from him or anyone else that they were all average to above average in like 20 different categories?
He did not share the response with me. I know he was doing a lot of work towards it, right? Cognitive work.
So you knew he was getting these assessments, but weren't you saying, hey, Dad, what are they saying? Didn't you do that?
I don't think I asked for medical, information, more about how are you doing? Do things feel less foggy for you? Are you more, you're doing it. I'm proud of you. Keep doing the work. Keep following up.
Post-collision travel. All right. So he would visit U.S. states like Washington, Oregon, Montana, Idaho.
God, he has to read the
All of
headings on his outline.
My sisters live in those states. I do. So yeah, I would say he did
Pathetic.
travel there.
And then in addition, he went to Peru and walked the Golden Trail. True?
I can't speak to that. I do know he went to
Wasn't
Peru.
there?
Okay. Do you remember like Machu Picchu? He went and visited Machu Picchu?
He did not share that with me.
Or
I would have done that if I was in Peru.
Yes. That he floated down the Amazon?
Did not.
This is early 2017.
17?
So
Mhm.
about 1 year after the collision.
Mhm.
Sounds good.
Do you recall how many weeks he was gone in Peru?
I think it was a couple of weeks, maybe.
Okay. And then Costa Rica, he did a zip line also the year after the accident. Do you recall this?
I was not aware he did a zip line, no.
How about Europe? Also the year after the accident. Do you recall he went to Europe the year after the accident?
So I recall in 2017, he had tickets to go with Robin. Then things fell apart with that relationship. And so he went to Europe with my younger sister, Jenny.
So the answer is
Yes, I'm aware he went to Europe.
he went to the Netherlands and Germany and Switzerland and Italy and France and Belgium.
Correct. I believe so.
The Netherlands, he went there 3 different times. Is that true?
Sounds correct.
And that's
Wow.
the year 2 and 3 after the accident.
Okay.
You with me? Like you have to say, I can't testify.
Nobody's with
Do you
you.
know that?
I was
Nobody.
not aware he had gone 3 times. I was aware that he had traveled to the Netherlands.
More than once?
Into my recollection, twice.
Okay. Morocco.
Yes.
He twice visited Morocco.
That sounds correct.
Canary Islands. This is the year after, 2 years after the accident.
That was the same time I went to
He's an
Morocco.
insufferable
The
douchebag.
Canary Islands,
That's
I don't
all I
even
can
know where
say
those
about
are.
it.
I should know. If they're not on a risk board, I don't know my geography. Do you know where it is?
That doesn't shock me.
I
You
would
don't know
have to
law
look at
either.
a map or an atlas as well.
Okay. Thailand. He visited Thailand 3 years after the accident. Does this
Yeah,
sound
with his
right?
friend Boyd.
And each of these times he'd take pictures and post them with him smiling at all these great tourist spots. Do you agree?
As you do.
Yes.
Yes.
Big
Exactly.
smiles in front of a Buddhist temple, for instance, right?
Yeah, we don't tend to post pictures of ourselves sad and in closets. No, we don't. We tend to.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
Like Eiffel Tower, those Italy, the coast, all have big smiling pictures of Terry. True?
I haven't seen a lot of those photos that you're talking about. I think there were quite a bit of photos before the accident too. I would want to make sure you could separate pre-accident, post-accident pictures.
Right. And you defer to your dad on that, right? If I asked him, like, does this state look right? And he says yes. I mean, he'd be
Yeah.
the guy.
Possibly.
All right.
Yeah. Like pretty much everybody
So
with
is
a
it
couple
fair to
bucks
say
at that stage of
his
life.
travels did not suffer as a result of the ski collision?
Yes. You could say
Seriously.
his travel companions might have suffered.
One clarification, Carlene, that's our girlfriend. I heard some comment that they were engaged, and then I never heard that from her, Carlene. To your knowledge, were
Well,
they
someone he doesn't.
engaged?
I've never heard that word or fiance used. I think that was their intent. And
Seriously.
plan, but
He
And then on the
sounds
prostate
jelly.
Cancer,
He
I heard
does.
the word cured from plaintiff's counsel, but I actually never heard it from a witness. Do you know that, in fact, your dad is cured?
I cannot answer to that.
You've been very kind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Mr. Sykes?
I have 1 second, Judge. Sure.
Are we done? You don't need to do anything else. She did great. Shut up. Let it go. Next witness. But he won't. He won't.
Mr. Owens
Well, here we go.
asked you about Sam Goldstein's comment about Terry being obsessed. Do you know why Terry is obsessed with this case? Do you know why?
Let this go. Don't go here.
I think my dad is very principled. And I think not only was he injured, but I think this accident really
Can't take this
hurt in a
out.
way.
Foghorn Leghorn.
It was,
Right
it
after
hurt him in a
Chief-
way that somebody
Chief
would
Spread
just
Eagle.
not
It's too much.
care for him when he was injured. I think that his brain injury, he really does become consumed with things. And I think feeling like righting this wrong for him has really kind of consumed him. And he wanted to make it right. He wanted someone to at least apologize or acknowledge or be held accountable for their decision on that day.
Do you have any experience in mental health? And if so, tell the jury what it is.
Yeah, so I managed a mental health and substance use disorder clinic for several years.
In the Coeur d'Alene area?
Yeah, in St. Mary's actually, for a FQHC there. So worked with people that were struggling mentally or with addiction. I ended up leaving just, during the pandemic. It got so that the demand was much greater than we could fill. And it was really a lot of people in crisis a lot of the time.
Just
So
sit
I was
down.
going to just take a break.
This witness went well.
Work with kids, get upstream a little bit.
Shut up.
and
Call the next
feel
one.
like create some buoyancy. And I still might go back to working in the mental health field, but for now, I like what I'm doing.
Now,
Mrs. Crazy.
you and your sister both went to the University of Idaho in Moscow, right?
All three of us.
Three of us. And so Shay was a senior, you were a freshman.
That's right. We were roommates. She was a senior. I was a freshman. That didn't work out so good. She was like, you need to be home by 10. You got homework to do. And I was like, wait, you're not my mom. But we got through it. Yeah.
Did Jenny ever come visit you over there?
Yeah, she did. And we went home every chance we got to.
Okay.
It was hard. Our parents were going through the divorce. So myself at 18 and Shay at 21, really felt like we left our little one behind. So
Are you there,
yeah, we
Peggy?
went back every chance we got.
You were quite close to her, right?
Yes.
Tell the jury about Jenny's mental health problems.
So let me begin by just saying she's one of my favorite people. But yeah, as probably a young
God bless her.
adult, she was diagnosed with mental disabilities. She is on disability now.
Objection. Just a minute. Sustained.
Do you know this for a fact about her diagnosis? And how do you know?
I could, because I'm her sister and we communicate with each other, and I know she's on disability now.
Your Honor, my objection was sustained, and we're just pretending it
I'm
wasn't.
asking what she said. I'm saying,
Objection is sustained. The answer is stricken and the jury should disregard the response. Go ahead, Mr. Sykes.
I need to be able to explore this because he did quite a bit. So, okay.
Up here for just a minute.
I don't know. I wasn't here for that. Did he get into this stuff? I mean, they're going to discredit the sister that's going to dump on dad. That may have some merit to it. Oh, that's awesome. Ooh. I'd love to do some skiing right now. Deer Valley would be a nice place. Skiing's all I've skied at Snowbird, Park City, and Deer Valley. All of them excellent. Excellent.
There was, and I hate this. They throw a bunch of dick pussy, going back and forth between texts with one another, and I never want to hear it again.
That was our first reenactment for the day. But it's always right on point.
So, Your Honor, my objection is
Okay, would you tell the jury what your experience with mental health is in the clinic? What did you do there,
Yeah.
and what did you learn?
So we had 7 counselors and people that came in for, it would be outpatient mental health services, anything from depression to anxiety to schizophrenia to whatever they were working on.
Your Honor, this is foundation for an expert opinion she is not allowed to give.
Will you approach the bench, please?
And and I hate, I hate this one. Ain't nothing but some dick pussy, dick pussy, dick pussy, dick pussy. Going back and forth between tents with one another, and I never want to hear it again.
State your name for the record, ma'am.
These nuts.
Okay, thank you.
The world frightens and confuses me. My primitive mind can't grasp these concepts.
Your Honor, my objection was unsustained.
Yes.
And then I just requested an opportunity to put this on the record at some later date. I mean, some later time after the jury's gone. Okay. All right. Tell me the kind of things that Jenny.
I just want to take the jury's time with the arguing.
Oh, yeah, we
back
understand
and
that.
forth. So go ahead, Mr.
Yeah,
Sykes.
we don't want to hold them up either. Tell me some of the things that you discussed with Jenny on the phone. And when you had meetings with her, what are some of the things you discussed with her?
Are you talking about like just our phone calls and
Yeah.
our catching? Yeah. So,
Particularly with respect to your dad.
oh yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
I saw her last month. I went over to Missoula for my birthday, and we took in a film festival, a documentary film festival together. So we got to visit a little bit about this upcoming trial. She was nervous.
This sounds like hearsay.
Sustained as to hearsay.
Not what she said, but just what you observed about her.
What I observed, I observed that she wasn't in a great mental place with us. She was
Expert opinion moved to strike. I think
as a sister, not as an expert.
Yeah, just a second. I want to hear the objection.
she was not in a good mental state. That's a
Okay.
expert opinion.
That's not.
I think she can offer a lay opinion under Rule 701.
Thank you, Judge. Go ahead. Offer your lay opinion, please.
Yeah, I was worried about her. I could tell that she was stressed out. She confided in me that her counselor had said,
You can't talk about what she maybe said
"Oh,
to
okay,
you,
all right,
but you're certainly able to talk about what you observed.
yeah." Her cat Potts wasn't doing really great. She was worried about her cat. She was worried about taking time to get here.
And those would be communications.
And that's something I can share or no? So something I observed.
You can't relay information that you obtained from her verbally.
Okay.
You can, what you saw when you were with her, you can
Right.
talk about that,
Right.
but not what she told you.
Okay. I just really enjoyed my time with her, as I always do.
Did she appear to be under a lot of stress?
Yeah, she had some, heaviness about her.
Over the years, as you've heard her talk about your dad, okay, have her complaints and observations always been accurate in your opinion?
I think her mind, she has a creative way of seeing things. She was an art major. She's very visual, struggles with verbal communication. I think of everyone in the family, I do best with almost, I don't know if I can call it translating or interpreting and drilling down to what she's trying to say. There are times, though, when, and I don't want to speak for my other sister, Shay, but I can speak for myself when I've experienced that her understanding of a situation is very different than mine.
To strike that. We're getting it out of a lay perspective.
I think that is a lay opinion of,
You need to lay the foundation based on her
Speculation.
perception.
Okay.
So based on her reasonable perception, then it would qualify as a lay opinion.
yeah, tell the jury what you've observed about her perceptions. Lay a foundation for us.
Yeah. I mean,
Lots of meetings, lots of telephone calls. You talked about that.
yeah. Well, we FaceTime quite a bit. Like I said, she's very visual. One of my favorite people to walk with because she'll say things like, "Wow, stop! Look at that! Look at those colors together." You know, she sketches a lot. She has a whole nother way of seeing the world that sometimes is beautiful.
That's an expert opinion.
So
Do we have to keep dealing with this?
Expert opinion.
Overruled.
It's a characterization of her own sister.
It's really cool when you can expand your way of understanding, right? And we're always kind of myopic. Like I see things how I see things. And you see things how you see things. So what I appreciate about Jenny is that she has another way of seeing things. And sometimes that is really difficult. Sometimes with communication, things get
the sister's crazy.
Twisted or confused, and there's a lot of
diagnosis.
clarification that has to happen often. And
Can we put on the record she is not
attorney
here
has
as
to
a mental
answer on it and
health
say-
expert, and she is not a mental health expert.
I think you can bring that out on cross-examination. This is a lay opinion of a sister about a sister and nothing more. Go ahead, Mr.
I'm
Sykes.
sorry you were interrupted. See if you can finish what your thought was.
yeah, and I don't
didn't
want
diagnose
anyone to
her
think that I'm
under
an
the
expert on
DSM or anything.
What I can speak to is the fact that I have had a relationship with her for 40, 41 years.
She's aware her sister is
She's
wacky.
kind of my first.
She's entitled to that opinion.
I was 6 when she was born. So I can just speak to that relationship and growing up with her.
Oh yeah.
You were saying, I think you said she had another
And
way
then
of
these
perceiving
numbskulls.
things. Is that what you were saying?
We'll redirect her.
Yeah,
and
I think
cross.
she has a unique way of looking at the world.
That's not always true.
Your Honor.
It's not always easy. Yeah.
Just a minute.
She can't make a credibility statement about her sister's
You
thoughts.
can't make an objection.
Sustained.
Let me rephrase
And
that.
also sustained as to vagueness.
Okay. When you said another way of, I want to quote you correctly, another way of perceiving or understanding, you said that.
I did say that. I think
Now, what did you mean by that is my question.
it kind of comes back to Mr. Owens when I spoke with him earlier, and he was saying, "So, are you telling the truth, or is she telling the truth?"
I haven't seen
I
that.
had a hard time answering that
I haven't been
because
looking, but I can believe
I
it.
can speak to my own experience, but I am not in her lived experience with her,
Absolutely.
who she is, and I have not lived her life and her experience. I know her to be truthful. I've never heard her lie. So if she's communicating that to you, that is her understanding of the experience.
But you
yes,
don't
we
let-
have had times though when she has saw something that
She's
I have
pregnant to do
not
it.
seen, or I would portray it as differently than her.
Based on your knowledge of her in the past few years, okay, and your knowledge of her over the years as her sister and one who loves her, are her perceptions always accurate?
They're not.
Hold on one second, Judge. No further questions, Judge.
Thank you. Mr. Owens.
I I understand Jenny to be a perfectly lovely, well-spoken person. Do you?
She's lovely. I would not use the words well-spoken.
Did you read her 136-page deposition?
Am I allowed to?
Of course you are.
No, I have not read her deposition.
Well, I don't know if you are, but I didn't give it to you. I'm just wondering. Does it surprise you that question and answering were perfectly eloquent? The whole thing for like hours and hours.
I object, Your Honor. She has no foundation to answer that question.
Yeah, and he's bolstering his witness, which is
Sustained.
inappropriate.
Does it surprise you that Jenny could talk eloquently for hours and hours?
That's your characterization.
Sustained, it sounds like counsel's testifying.
Okay. She has a bachelor's degree, right?
Whoa, it's hard fought, but we got there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is the answer?
Yes, is the answer.
I can't wait to see this wackadoo.
I mean, it sounds like I'm defending your sister here and you're not. So let's kind of talk about it.
No, because I will. Yeah.
Overruled.
You said Jenny is truthful. Yes?
I've never known her to intentionally lie. No.
So if she says your father violated boundaries she set for years, you defer to her?
Objection, Your Honor, that's beyond the scope, and he's already covered that in his.
Overruled.
I would say that's something my sister has communicated to me, is that it's something she really practices with my dad, is healthy boundaries.
And both the other sisters do too, right?
Yeah.
Set boundaries,
Yeah.
and sometimes he violates them.
I think
True?
all healthy relationships have to have boundaries. And yes, that has been, after the accident, definitely something that I struggle with my dad.
Is she telling the truth when she believes that your dad would exaggerate for money and celebrity?
Objection, Your Honor, that's beyond the scope. It's also, counsel.
Overruled.
She would be telling her truth.
I am winding up here. Is she telling the truth
Yeah.
when she says he's deceptive?
Your Honor, I make the same objection, that's improper questioning.
I think we covered this before also, didn't we?
That's a new word.
Okay. Overruled.
I would say she's telling her truth.
Is she telling her truth when she says,
Yes.
I'm having a problem finding my quote on
Short
this.
for
I
BS.
apologize. Give me 1 second, please. He will get whatever monetary benefit he can in business, even if it's dishonest.
Objection, same. It's been gone through,
That's not a
Yeah,
quote,
it's-
but it is a summary.
and it's totally irrelevant, it's improper questioning.
Overruled.
I don't know that to be true. Again, this is Jenny's.
Wait.
Is she telling the truth when she describes your
With you,
dad
Peggy.
as anal retentive?
I'm thinking that word came up with my older sister too, because she brought up that word and I said, I don't even know what anal retentive means.
Jen?
What does anal retentive mean? So if you're talking like type A in order and details, I would say that's true.
Okay, so let me make sure we make sure we're on the same page.
Okay.
Is she telling the truth when she says he has anal retentive? He's anal retentive.
I would not call him anal retentive, no.
Okay, but both your sisters did, right? Shay said that too. Do you recall?
Shay said that the word anal retentive came up in her deposition, and I said it did not come up in mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't make it up.
Came from somewhere.
Okay, anal retentive has nothing to do with our bottoms. Is that true? Just to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
It's got the word anal in it.
I know.
What the hell is going on?
Is that the definition?
I'll tell you what. Let's.
Chief
I think
Anal
it's
Spread Eagle.
obsessive, sort of. That's how I understand it. But and it is.
Sustained.
She asked me, but
This is surreal.
Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on, shall we?
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Sykes, anything else?
Thank you, Chief Anal Spread Eagle, for that amazing display.
So please approach.
Oh, shit. Oh, we're going to have to do it again.
And I hate, God, I hate this word. Ain't nothing but some dick pussy, dick pussy, dick pussy, dick pussy. Going back and forth between texts with one another, and I never want to hear it again.
Oh, my Lord, what was that? It deserves a full goat salute. It's not over yet. I'm not convinced this is over until they call another witness. Absolutely. This guy is going to want to say something else, and he shouldn't. He won. That was horrible. That was a horrible way to end Cross. Horrible. He looked like an absolute buffoon. Well, he has the entire time. But that was the coup de grace buffoonery right there. That was, we've reached the nadir, okay? Let him limp off the stage after that horrible, horrible cross. And in his mind, he won't even go lick his wounds because he's too stupid to know he lost.
So you're done with your questioning right now.
I'm not done yet.
Oh, I thought you were.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, dummy. You are. If I was his partner, I would literally get a hook. It'd have to be
You answered
huge,
some of
by the
Mr. Owen's last questions that she's telling her truth. Define that for us, please. What does that mean?
I think human beings move through
Horrible
the world
question.
and we
Horrible.
have our own understanding and experience of things. I think
We are-
there's a neurodiversity that exists in this world, and there are different ways of understanding and experience. Like I said, I don't know Jenny to be untruthful. I think she sees the world in a curious, different way.
But that's not your truth.
No, it's not my experience. Those are not my experiences.
No further questions.
Would she get it wrong?
Stupid.
She didn't talk to her dad for 13 years.
I believe that is wrong.
Overruled. Overruled.
You asked her that question. She said no.
So you think she can be wrong?
Yeah, that sounds wrong to me from my knowledge and understanding. So if you want to clarify, you're saying that after she moved out, she never saw my dad for 13 years?
We'll defer to her testimony, but whatever
Okay.
she said. Okay. Thanks.
I forgot to ask you one question. 2017, your dad broke up with.
Oh my God, he's
Robin
still
Tate,
going.
right? And she went to.
Overruled. Go ahead.
She went to. He took Jenny to Europe with him, didn't he?
That's correct.
They have a good time.
No, it was miserable. I think at some point she sent me footage where the bearing had gone out on my dad's wheelie suitcase. And it was just an hour and a half of him like spinning the wheel, trying to figure it out. And when I said, "How are things going?"
Figure it out.
It's an accident, huh?
No.
Owens?
Your Honor, I'm going to put this on the record because I think I misspoke.
I'm sure you did.
Jenny, you said that you and your father didn't speak for 13 years after you graduated from high school. We spoke.
Your Honor, I object to this.
I'm correcting my error because I spoke in error. It says we spoke.
Do you
It
have a
was
pending
just
question?
distant.
This is cross-examination, not
So
error
I
correction.
misspoke. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so you can step down. You're still under subpoena, and so you need to be available for any further for testimony, perhaps later in the case.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, sweet Jesus. What?
Thank you.
That was horrific.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. I was just reminded, I'm sorry, Ms. Gresham. You're still under the witness rule, meaning that you can't watch the proceedings, you can't sit in here, and you can't talk to other witnesses about the case. Thank you.
If I could get away with it, that would be my thumbnail for this. that would be the perfect thumbnail for this stream.
Confer with more learned counsel. Just a minute.
The old anal spread eagle stream. That was like an Olympic competition to do the most damage to your own case by two of the worst attorneys I've ever seen. Strategically, stylistically, any way you look at it, it was horrible.
Your Honor, we're going to call Richard Boehm, medical doctor from Florida, by video because he had a wedding and could not come to the trial. And so,
Set that up.
no, we're ready to go, but the jury might want a
Richard.
short break,
I think
5 or 7 minutes, something like that, I mean, whatever.
I think we're okay. It's only been it's been less than 30 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah.
And counsel, for the record,
Might
would you
have to have a
spell
cocktail.
that witness's name?
It's getting to me. It's getting to me.
And that's an MD.
MD, PhD, biomedical engineer.
All right, thank you.
Biomedical engineer. So this is an expert to say that we think that the force involved was her falling on him. Okay, but they need to do it. But it's going to be boring. I thought we were going to get him. I thought we were going to get Terry today.
My name is Lance Harrison. I'm the videographer. The court reporter is Rossanne Morgan. We represent Max Merritt, located in Salt Lake City, Utah. The time and day indicated on the Zoom feed is 12:11 p.m. Mountain Time.
You know what his fee is?
March 13th, 2023.
$1 million.
This is the case of Terry Sanderson versus Gwyneth Paltrow. Case number
I had to.
190500048 in the 3rd Judicial District Court, Summit County, State of Utah. Counsel will now introduce themselves and the court reporter will swear in the witness.
Lawrence Bueller for plaintiff Terry Sanderson.
Bueller.
James Egan for Gwyneth Paltrow, the defendant.
With me is also Robert Sykes.
I don't know, just myself, if I can ever get this thing turned on. Okay, Robert Sykes, also counsel for the plaintiff.
Doctor, can you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do, Madam Court Reporter.
Thank you. Go ahead, counsel.
You're welcome. Thank you. Dr. Bain, could you state your name and spell it for the record, please?
Certainly. My name is Richard Bain, and that is spelled B-O-E-H-M-E.
Okay.
Dick Bain.
And I'd like to just get some background and educational information.
I am better known as Dr. Evil.
Where were you born?
Just get it out of the way.
Alabama.
And where did you grow up?
Huntsville, Alabama.
And next, I'd like to hear about your education, starting with high school and then through universities, undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate school. Thank you.
I graduated from high school in Huntsville, Alabama, and went into the Navy. I graduated with honors with a Bachelor's of Science in Aerospace Engineering from the U.S. Naval Academy. I did my postgraduate work in nuclear engineering, and I served on board a number of nuclear submarines in the U.S. Navy as a nuclear trained engineering officer.
Any way we can turn it up, I would love.
During the application process in the U.S. Navy as a nuclear trained engineering officer, I resigned my commission to apply and go to medical school. During the application process, I worked as an advanced design aerospace engineer for the Moor Corporation on the Star Wars project back in the 1980s. I matriculated into medical school at the University of Alabama School of Medicine in Birmingham. While I was there, I took a leave of absence to complete my PhD in biomedical engineering. And after I was conferred the PhD, I went back and completed the MD. And after I was conferred the MD degree, I went back on active duty in the Navy. And I conducted my internship in general surgery and my residency training in neurology at Bethesda Naval Hospital located outside of Washington, D.C. While I was in the Washington, D.C. area, I worked at the Naval Embassy Research Laboratory. I taught the postdocs until my retirement in 2005. I became board certified in adult neurology, and I completed fellowship training in neuroradiology while I was in the Navy. I currently have a private practice in neurology in Jacksonville Beach, and that's about it, guys.
Okay. Can you explain your education more specifically in neurology and biomedical engineering?
Sure. Neurology is a subspecialty in medicine where the physician of record deals with patients that have disorders of the central, peripheral, and autonomic nervous systems. A biomedical engineer, well, the biomedical engineering field is a very broad field that brings the disciplines of medicine and engineering together. It ranges from genetic research to the design and implementation of artificial limbs and joints, monitoring equipment in the hospital, heart-lung machines, materials used for artificial limbs, teeth, these types of things. My particular specialty within the field of biomedical engineering is the study of complex fluid flow and the study of externally applied force application to the human.
That was.
I'm sorry, doctor. I just missed that last part.
The study.
Oh, yeah, it's a giant one.
Externally applied force application to the human.
Got it, to the human. Thank you. Sorry.
You're welcome, sir.
Now I'd like to move on to training as a neurologist. How many years have you been practicing as a neurologist and training in neurology?
Over 30 years.
And what about how many years as a biomedical engineer?
I would say about the same period of time. I did that work in the Navy starting on or about 1989. So I guess that would qualify as 30 years.
Okay. Can you describe your hospital and clinical work?
Sure. I have hospital privileges at the St. Vincent's and Baptist Health Systems here in Jacksonville, Florida, which comprises 5 different hospitals. And then I have primarily an outpatient clinic in neurology, and I see patients 5 days a week, Monday through Friday.
Yeah, you're supposed to put a background up.
Neurology patients comprise primarily of headache patients, trauma patients, patients with stroke, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, peripheral neuropathies, these types of things. So That's what I deal with on a daily basis.
Peach.
How many times have you testified in court as an expert witness?
A lot. I would say in the private sector, it's over 100 times. When I was in the government, I used to testify on behalf of the government, i.e. the Navy, at different tribunals and that type of stuff. And I don't know the number of that, probably less than 50.
Are you compensated for your time as you prepare and testify in court?
Yes, I am.
And what types of cases in the private sector do you testify?
Well, I get involved in what we refer to as personal injury cases, i.e. patients that have some type of medical malady as a result of an externally applied force application to some part of their body.
You know he does.
I get involved in medical malpractice cases and also in product liability cases.
Okay. Does that include head trauma?
Yes, it does. And also, to be complete, every so often now that I'm retired from the Navy, I do get a government case from time to time. I would say maybe once per year.
Okay. I'd like to move to your professional specialties and interests. Other than what you've described, are there any other things like patients or brain injuries in general or concussion victims that you have specialties or interests in?
Well, I see patients that have closed head trauma, that have concussion symptoms ongoing, if you will. So I hope that answered your question.
And that is how it's done by a neurologist, correct?
Well, yes. I mean, some neurologists elect to specialize their clinic in certain disorders, if you will, but I don't. I'm more of a general neurologist. So in addition to the trauma patients, I see the other patients that I've already described.
Okay. What about your professional specialties in biomedical engineering? Anything else that you can tell us?
Well, I did that work in the Navy, and then when I came into the private sector, I got involved in the three types of cases. Well, actually, the two: personal injury and product liability. Medical malpractice deals with just neurology, but product liability cases, i.e., if a particular medical device fails for some reason, then I get called in to assess why it did that, if it in fact did do that, if you will. And then, of course, the personal injury aspect of it. This would be one of those types of cases.
Okay. So you mentioned personal injury. That would include closed head brain injury?
Yes, and spinal cord injuries, these types of things. Anything that involves the nervous system. And keep in mind that we have nerves that go to all parts of our body.
What is a closed head brain injury?
Well, closed head injury just means that the externally applied force to the head did not open up the head, i.e. you don't have an open skull fracture or anything like that. An example of an open head injury would be like a gunshot wound to the head. That would be an example of that.
Is that the same as a TBI or traumatic brain injury?
Well, closed head trauma just describes an externally applied force application to the head. Now, what it does to the brain, if you have any type of dysfunction of brain activity after the force application, we refer to that as a traumatic brain injury.
What is an MTBI?
M just means mild traumatic brain injury.
And what about post-concussive syndrome?
Post-concussion syndrome is just a description of a group of symptoms that make up a syndrome. Post-concussion implies that there's been some type of externally applied force application to the head that results in some type of brain dysfunction. And in classic terms, a post-concussion or a concussion is in fact a mild traumatic brain injury. However, you need to qualify that whether or not the concussion is permanent or not. Most concussions, most people that have concussive-like symptomatology from a blow to the head, the most common of which is a headache, will resolve quickly over time. And the trauma literature is pretty specific in this description. 95% of people that have a closed head injury that have concussive symptomatology resulting from that will return back to their baseline normal within 1 year, 95% of the time. So that still leaves 5% of those that don't. So you have to qualify whether or not the concussion or the concussive symptomatology is permanent or not.
Okay, regarding the group that does not recover within a year, what are the problems that typically persist?
Well, keep in mind that your brain is your whole being. So you can have any type of symptom relating to brain function. Keep in mind that the study or the field of neurology was learned stroke by stroke. So to give you some examples, if you lost eyesight as a result of a blow to the head, that would be a brain injury because you lost your eyesight.
He really
You can have
an aquarium with
paralysis.
sharks.
You can have double vision. You can have vertigo or imbalance. You can have hearing loss. You can have disorders of mentation, such as memory loss, intermittent confusion. The most common symptom after a blow to the head would be a headache. So people will describe different types of headache syndromes as a result of blow to the head.
Okay. In your career, about how many adults of Terry's age have you treated or evaluated for brain injury? Terry was 69 at the time.
Well, I don't keep track of that data. It's been quite a few, I would imagine, over time. Our neurology group was the group that provided neurological services to our professional football team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, for a couple of years. So in the younger population, we saw it all the time. But in that particular age group, it's going to be less common because the prevalence of closed head injury in elderly individuals is less, with the exception of patients that have Parkinson's disease. People with Parkinson's disease lose their ability to control their center of gravity, so they have a tendency to fall. And also they have a tendency of not being able to protect themselves when they fall, i.e. put their hands in front of their face. So we see a disproportionate amount of patients that have Parkinson's disease that end up falling, striking their head on the ground, and then having any varying degree of brain injury as it relates to that fall.
We've asked you to review the case of plaintiff Terry Sanderson. I'd like you to explain what you have reviewed and relied on in this case.
I forgot it was a dark, dark night.
For example, did you meet with
that was a hoot,
Mr. Sanderson?
Yes, I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Sanderson in my office on April 28th, 2021.
What was the primary reason you were asked, or you asked to see Mr. Sanderson?
Well, whenever I get involved in these types of matters, I insist on seeing the patient for two reasons. To get there, keep in mind that the patient is the repository of all information which a healthcare provider is going to come up with a medical differential diagnosis and ultimately a final diagnosis. So you got the source in front of you, but also I had the medical records. So I was able to corroborate the medical records with
Spread Eagle
Sanderson and then get his
It's still insufferable.
description of the events
You're welcome.
leading to his condition. And then, of course, I performed a physical examination on him as well.
Okay. What were the medical records, as you recall, that you reviewed in this case?
Fortunately, I have them listed here because I don't commit all this to memory. I have the incident report from the actual event, the Park City Instacare, that's like an urgent care facility.
That was the gem of the
I
day.
have the VA medical records. I have imaging, x-rays and a CT scan. Then I have Dr. Goldstein's records. I have Dr. Wendell's records, or Dr. Wendell Gibby's records, that is. Dr. Alana Fong records. And then I have numerous deposition transcripts. And that includes a Mr. Ramon, a Ms. Gresham, Sanderson, Harath, Davidson.
Don't you hate that when that
Smith.
happens?
And then I have deposition testimony from Mr. Sanderson, a Ms. Paltrow, and Eric Christensen, Sam Goldstein, and Dr. Pong. And so those are the materials that I reviewed.
What do you recall about Miss Carlene Davidson, the former girlfriend of Terry Sanderson?
Well, that there was a significant change in Mr. Sanderson as it relates to the incident back in 2016.
Some of these depositions or these witnesses, we call them before and after witnesses. Is that your understanding?
Yes, it is.
What is the significance to you of the before and after witnesses that you reviewed in this case?
Well, there is a type of patient that we see commonly in our practice that may not give us a consistent or inconsistent history and may not have insight into their own problems. And I'm referring to patients that have like dementia, these types of things. And so the healthcare provider has to rely upon witness history from close observers, like a family member, spouse, a coworker, to get the history. This is one of the problems that we have as neurologists, especially with patients that we're initially evaluating for Alzheimer's dementia. It is almost universal that it is a loved one or a close associate that brings that patient in for evaluation, where the patient has very little insight into the problems that are seen by others. So witnesses can be exceedingly helpful in obtaining historical information on a patient. Does
Terry Sanderson have Alzheimer's or dementia in your opinion?
No.
What is the importance of some of these before and after witnesses whose depositions you reviewed to your understanding of the problems?
Well, if you have a situation where there is brain dysfunction from a specific event, i.e. there's a stepwise decline in functioning, and it doesn't have to, it's any type of functioning, the close observer is going to be in a position to be able to relate the change or the magnitude of the change in the symptoms in the patient at hand, whereas the patient may not be able to express those changes to the healthcare provider. So before and after witnesses can be exceedingly helpful in those types of cases.
And you understand Terry Sanderson was involved in a ski crash correct?
That's correct.
So do you recall reviewing records by and the deposition of Whitney Smith, a ski patroller at Deer Valley?
Yes, I do.
Okay. We'll get to that later. I'd just like to go through the list of things that you reviewed.
Sure.
Next, did you review some of the defense expert reports, the reports that were produced by the defendant, Gwyneth Paltrow?
I did see some correspondence relating to those reports, yes, and I reviewed those.
Okay. Now I'm going to share my screen and show you the it's Plaintiff's Trial Exhibit 1. Just give me a second. And this is the Deer Valley Resort Company Incident Report Form. Do you see that at the top?
Yes, I do.
And it's dated February 26, 2016. You see that too.
Yes, I do.
Do you also see that it indicates the incident or the time was 12 o'clock? I assume noon because...
Yes, it's noon. I'm not familiar with night skiing.
There is night skiing, but not at Deer Valley, I don't believe, and not that late. And it involves Terry Sanderson. And I'm just going to highlight a few things. Well, it's not letting me highlight. Let's see if I can highlight it here. Oops.
I don't think Terry gets on today.
There it is. Now
This
it
is
is.
going to take forever.
Do you see that blue highlight?
Yes, I do.
It says it's under insured's description of the incident, correct?
Yes.
What does it say?
I think it says
It
injured.
was hit from behind.
Okay, I'm going to go to page 2 of Exhibit 1. And do you see under, next to the question, what did you do? I'm going to try to highlight it, but can you read that for the record, please?
Certainly, he was assessed to have a mild disorientation and rib pain on the right side, and then he was transported via toboggan to the screening facility, I would imagine. And then on reassessment, he was still disoriented.
Okay.
I'm just going to register an objection to the degree that did not read into the record exactly what is written in that answer.
Okay.
Whatever. Shut your hole.
What is the, why is that, what we just reviewed in this Exhibit 1, why is it important? Does it confirm head trauma and broken ribs, you believe, for example?
Well, the clinical description of rib pain certainly is consistent with fractured ribs on the right side, which was later determined. And the disorientation tells me that he did not have volitional, meaningful interaction with this environment. So there is an element of loss of consciousness involved here.
And what is the significance of loss of consciousness?
Well, a loss of consciousness is certainly dysfunction of the brain. I mean, obviously, people aren't on a ski slope unconscious unless something happens to them. So this is certainly an aberrancy of brain function.
Okay. Just to go through the exhibits at the beginning instead of later, I'm going to go through another exhibit. This will be plaintiff's trial exhibit number 4. And do you see this exhibit 4?
Yes, I do.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind looking at that, and in particular, the report that I just highlighted in blue.
States he lost consciousness and ski patrol responded.
Okay. What is the significance of this report, which apparently occurred the same day as the ski crash, to you? What does this mean as an expert?
Well, it's just documenting what happened to him. So he had a loss of consciousness.
Okay. And like I said, I'm just going through these to make sure you're familiar with them, because I'd like to discuss what they mean to your opinions, or to form your opinions. Next, I'm going to show you trial exhibit 5. Do you see this exhibit? And if you do, please describe it.
It's a progress note and from the emergency department. And the visit was February 27th. And then his chief complaint was a ski accident yesterday with positive LOC, which means loss of consciousness, for approximately 5 minutes. He states he has a slight headache today and being more irritable. And he is also complaining of right lateral rib pain that is worse with inspiration, i.e. breathing, and he denies any neck pain.
Okay, again, why is this record important to your opinions?
Well, it's consistent with what happened with yesterday, and he still has the right, the rib pain. So it's just consistent with the history that was previously given.
I'm just going through is there anything about this record that you think is important to discuss about your opinions today?
Oh, it's just the history.
Judge, I think some people may be having trouble seeing that. I wonder if we could have permission to have them move up to the front or something so they can see it if they want, because it is a little bit small.
Are any members of the jury having a difficult time reading the exhibit or any of the exhibits? If you are, please, you can move to these closer chairs, or you can certainly walk around front. Feel free to do that. Okay? All right.
He basically had an unremarkable exam. And the history tells the story.
Nah, brah. We'll take your word for it.
And finally, I'm going to show you Exhibit 7, which is the last exhibit we'll show right now. And can you describe this Exhibit 7?
It's a progress note from February 29, 2016.
And where I've highlighted, oh wait, not the, that's too much. Well, let's see if I can. Okay, the part that's highlighted, what is the significance of that?
Once again, it's the history. Mr. Sanderson did comment on his injury sustained on the 26th, where he had loss of consciousness after a skier impact, and he has been experiencing foggy feeling along with mood change.
Okay, I believe this record, well, I may have to return to one of the other exhibits. I think it's Exhibit 5. That's the longer one. And in particular, I'd like you to look at the page 4 of Exhibit 5. And are you able to see this record?
Yes, I am. It's a radiology report.
Can you explain the significance of this record?
Well, it documents the injury on the right side of his chest, responsible for the pain and increased pain when he was breathing. And basically it shows under impression acute fractures of the right 4th through 7th lateral ribs with minimal displacement of the 4th and 6th ribs.
So does this mean he broke 4 ribs in this ski crash?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
A good place to take a last break. Okay, let's take a short break and then we'll come back for the last session.
Yeah, without getting into further detail, there were drugs involved that people were giving to me that ended up being glue. Like I smoked some glue and stuff. I thought I was smoking crack, and
Okay.
Well, if an objection wasn't made, it's waived, right? It's trial.
Right.
Yeah, we've already said we can watch the whole thing.
swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I suppose.
I'm I'm looking for Dr. Evil clips. I don't know why. I don't know exactly what inspired me, but that's what I'm doing.
The jury's on their way. Yes.
I have one simple request, and that is to have sharks with frickin' laser beams attached to their heads.
Finish this, according to the bailiff.
It's, the whole thing is about 2 minutes, 2 hours and 19 minutes.
Yeah, and there's another part to this video.
If they can stay,
Never mind then, we'll just stop at 5.
yeah. I wouldn't mind, but I think they would be a little surprised.
Yeah, I misspoke earlier because I was just going off this video.
I was also.
Yeah, I forgot there's a second.
They broke it up when we took a break for the last 3, 4 weeks. I mean, we don't have to go about it across, but we think it'd be unfair.
We wouldn't mind.
And then I'll want to go over our witness lineup for tomorrow.
That's very simple.
Go ahead.
Shay Harris. Mark Harris.
Yes.
Terry Sanderson.
Yes.
And Gwyneth Paltrow if there's time.
Okay. So Terry first before Gwyneth.
And I want to put you on the witness stand and ask you a few questions about shady trial tactics. Is that okay?
Anal.
The captions just said, okay, anal. Is that what he said? And in what context? I can't take it.
I have one simple request, and that is to have sharks with frickin' laser beams attached to their heads.
Lawyers have informed me that we were all wrong about this, and it's going to take a little longer, so we will break at 5 or a few minutes after 5 today. So, thank you. You may proceed, counsel.
Okay, I'm going to go back to that Exhibit 5. Sorry, I took it. There's another report. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Another radiology report. Can you tell us what that means to you?
It's a radiology report of the CT scan of the brain without contrast.
And what are the findings that you see?
Well, the pertinent findings is that there was a prominent ventricular system enlargement with associated atrophy or shrinkage of the brain, if you will. And there was, more importantly, there was no evidence of a hemorrhage or a brain bleed on the CT scan since he was experiencing symptoms consistent with the concussion. So obviously you want to rule out some type of abnormal finding within the brain. You do that with, in an emergent setting, you do that with a CT scan, which was done here. So basically, from a traumatic standpoint, there's no abnormal findings, i.e. like a skull fracture or bleeding within the brain.
When you say emergent, that means emergency?
Yes, I mean, most emergency rooms are equipped with a CT scan for that reason, to look for fracture and hemorrhage. So if you really need something more than that, like an MRI of a particular anatomical structure, then usually that's scheduled on an outpatient basis.
Down below under impression, number 2, it says, I'll let you read it. Oops, I'm going to try to highlight this. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
In your own words, can you explain what this means?
Well, the prominent ventricular system discordant with mild volume loss suggests an anatomical finding of NPH, which stands for normal pressure hydrocephalus. And it says in the appropriate clinical setting. So you have to clinically correlate these findings with the patient.
Does this mean, was this number 2 that you just discussed, is that related to the ski crash injury?
No.
Probably IG.
So you had one clinical interview with Terry Sanderson, correct?
Yes, it did.
And that was in your clinic.
Yes, it was.
How did you clinically assess Terry's TBI symptoms?
Well, basically, they are mild, if that's what you're looking for. But basically, he has an ongoing, from his history, he has an ongoing post-concussive symptoms.
Does mild mean that it's insignificant?
No, not necessarily. It depends on the symptoms. Like I said, your brain is your entire being. So someone can lose, for example, eyesight in one eye, but if you're a surgeon, then you're done, if you know what I mean. But if you engage in other activities, you could probably continue on with just monocular vision. But for a surgeon, you really need both eyes to perform surgeries. And that would be an example.
So how did you corroborate that Terry Sanderson had a TBI, or traumatic brain injury?
All from his concussion. A concussion defines a TBI, traumatic brain injury. So it's like I said before, the issue becomes whether or not the symptoms are permanent or not. And that's where his medical records, i.e. ongoing medical care by his treating physicians and the so-called before and after witnesses come into play to corroborate the time course of those symptoms.
Okay, next I'd like to ask you about your opinions in this case, especially those involving the injuries he suffered and what they mean from the ski crash of February 26, 2016. So first I'd like to address the concussion. What are your opinions regarding the concussion?
Well, that he sustained a concussion, and that came from the closed head trauma from the ski accident.
What are your opinions as to the cause of the TBI?
Well, basically his head struck the ground, and that would be the force application that would result in the closed head injury, resulting in the TBI.
What are your conclusions or opinions regarding the rib fractures?
Well, that once again, that came from his contact with the ground, from the ski accident, that is.
Okay. Well, based upon your biomedical engineering and the physics, tell us what this can indicate regarding the cause of his fall to the ground.
Well, the falling to the ground resulted from his center of gravity being shifted outside of his torso. So he had to, it drew him to the ground. And so the question becomes, what caused that shift in his center of gravity, causing him to fall to the ground? And that was, since he fell to the right side, that was an impact from, or an externally applied force application from his left side. And that's what caused it.
Okay. Now, does this indicate that Terry Sanderson was hit from behind?
Well, yes, it does. I mean, if, you got a witness saying that he was struck from behind, but suffice it to say, the force application came from behind and from the left side, causing him to go over onto his right side. And that's where that impact did not result, that first impact did not result in rib fractures or concussion. It was his contact with the ground that resulted in the injuries that we see in the medical records.
Okay. Can you explain how your understanding of force application show this?
Well, the biggest thing is that when you fall to the ground and you have evidence of rib fractures on the lateral side of your torso, then obviously there was a force application directly to the ribs in that location. And so when you fall to your right side, your elbow or your arm gets in the way between your chest wall and the ground. And so the hard object would be you, i.e. your arm and elbow, making contact with the rib, resulting in the rib fracture. And then very, very shortly after that, then you strike your head against the ground as well.
This was a jewel, Griggsy.
Or show that Terry Sanderson was hit from behind by Gwyneth Paltrow?
Well, I don't know who, I guess it was her that struck him, but yes, it does show that he was struck from behind and went forward to the right, causing those injuries upon impact with the ground.
Well, can you walk us through the engineering and physics, unless you've already explained it?
Well, you can put numerical values on this because we are subjected, everyone on this planet is subjected to the Earth's gravitational pull. We refer to that as gravity, and that is 1G. So it attracts us to the Earth. So we as humans, we maintain primarily an erect posture. And so if you shift your center of gravity where that outside of your torso, you have a tendency to fall unless you're holding on to something. So you will fall to the ground, okay? And so you can calculate the time it takes to fall to the ground for different body parts that, depending on his height. And so you can appreciate that when you fall like this, your ribs are located around here, your head's up here. So actually your ribs are going to hit first and followed by your head. But it takes a certain amount of time to do that. And that's, falling basically like a free fall, if you will. So it takes less than a half a second for that to occur. And there's a term we like to use in physics called kinetic energy. And when you calculate the kinetic energy over a distance, we refer to that as work done. And so you can calculate the kinetic energy that's imparted upon different body parts, knowing where those body parts are and how they struck the ground. And so in Mr. Sanderson's case, the history from witnesses or a witness was that there was a person on top of him that fell to the ground along with him. That would impact the force application to his ribs, but not to his head. Okay, because the person wasn't sitting on his head as he fell to the ground. So when you do the calculation, it turns out to be about 4,000 newtons of impact force to the ribs, which is enough to cause a rib fracture. And that's consistent. Now with the head, that's a different calculation as well for obvious reasons, because the mass of the head is much different from the mass of Mr. Sanderson with Ms. Paltrow on him as he's falling to the ground. So when you do those calculations, and keeping in mind he was also wearing a helmet, and so that helmet serves to absorb some of the energy transferred to the brain. So when you strike the ground, you have a kinetic energy calculation as well. And so you determine the velocity, you know the mass of the head, and you know the distance between the brain and the outer scalp, and the distance of the helmet is about 2 inches. So that all comes into play. Now keep in mind, if he wasn't wearing a helmet, the force application to his head would be much higher. In fact, about 3 times higher. So the helmet did serve its purpose of absorbing some of the blow, if you will, in layman's terms. But that calculation turned out to be about 240 newtons of impact force. And that is assuming that he fell on level ground. Now, I understand that ski slopes have some type of incline. I don't know what that is in this particular case. Any incline would make the calculation more severe because he would have fallen further. And so the distance traveled on a fall increases the velocity, which is proportional to the square of the velocity. The kinetic energy is proportional to the square of the velocity in these types of calculations. For all intents and purposes, fall to level ground with 240 newtons of impact force to the brain.
So the newtons are the force that was applied, a physics term, correct?
Yes, it is a physics term, and it is the force application to the brain.
So the force that was applied, let's start with the ribs first. And on the right side, indicate that Mr. Sanderson was hit from behind or the side, and with Ms. Paltrow landing on top of him, that shows that it's much more likely than not that he was hit by Ms. Paltrow.
Well, he was hit by someone from the side and from behind. Keep in mind that that person also landed on him. Because usually people that just fall to the ground, do not suffer rib fractures. And the reason being is that there's not enough energy being transferred to the rib. It takes something else. And the something else would be someone falling with them on top of them. And that would certainly be enough to do it, yeah, at least in this case, assuming that a person weighed around 130 pounds. That would certainly be enough force to do that.
I'm going to defend Dr. Evil here.
The rib injuries.
This is oversimplified.
Would you use the analogy that they're kind of like?
But you have to do this.
The bumper of a car that was
If anyone
involved
else
in a
does it, they
rear-ended
say you're not an
collision
expert.
where another car rear-ended the car,
And it gets kicked out of court.
They help show what the injury might be.
So you need to hire this guy.
Well, the rib injury
Water
really
runs
depicts
downhill.
how the injury occurred.
Even though we all
What happened.
instinctively know it.
Not the head
Know it's in the
trauma.
record.
The head trauma was just a result of the fall. Okay, I mean, that's independent of anyone being on top of him, falling to the ground. The fact that he fell to the ground and struck his head is responsible for the head trauma. The ribs tell us how it happened because
I couldn't agree more.
there's only really one way in this particular scenario.
I'm not saying stop.
That
I'm just
there
giving
could have been enough
context.
force application to fracture those ribs. Now, if there were no rib fractures, you wouldn't be able to say how this all occurred.
So does this indicate who hit whom?
Well, yes, if you had a choice between Mr. Sanderson hitting Miss Paltrow or Miss Paltrow hitting Mr. Sanderson, you would have to pick Miss Paltrow hitting Mr. Sanderson from behind and falling on top of him to account for the rib fracture.
I'm sorry, say that again?
If you were to compare two scenarios, Mr. Sanderson striking Miss Paltrow or Miss Paltrow striking Mr. Sanderson and falling to the ground, there's only one scenario that would account for enough force application to fracture those ribs, and that would be Miss Paltrow striking Mr. Sanderson from behind and then falling on top of him down towards the right side onto the right side of his torso.
So you did consider the possibility that Terry could have hit Miss Paltrow?
Well, yes, I considered a number of different scenarios. Not only that, but the possibility of a rotational effect both ways. Terry Sanderson striking Miss Paltrow from behind and then rotating in such a way to the ground. Could that account for the rib injuries, and vice versa? Miss Paltrow striking Mr. Sanderson from behind and rotating, in such a way. I took those into consideration, and those were eliminated for a number of reasons. But the biggest one is it takes a half a second to fall to the ground, and to rotate in such a way that you strike your ribs onto the ground over your elbow would indicate that, let's say that Mr. Sanderson struck Miss Paltrow from behind and rotated, and she fell on top of him as a result of the rotational effect. Mr. Sanderson would have had to generate the initial rotational force to cause that rotation in order for him to land beneath Miss Paltrow. Okay, and then in so doing, he would have landed on his back. Now keep in mind that if you're going to rotate 180 degrees in less than half a second, that's basically a rotational rate of between 360 and 400 degrees per second. Now,
You realize he's just
having
making
dealt
this
with
up, right?
athletes all my life, I've dealt with swimmers or divers. Divers
No
have a
question.
difficult time even generating that type of
Because see the
rotational
sharks
rate. They do their
with freaking
complex
lasers.
dives. So Mr. Sanderson
No, he makes sense.
certainly would not be able to generate that rotational component and land underneath Miss Paltrow. Then vice versa, if Miss Paltrow struck Mr. Sanderson from behind and rotated around, then that would have been at an even more increased rotational rate for Mr. Sanderson to be underneath Miss Paltrow for those ribs to fracture. And then again, more likely than not, he would have landed on his back and not his side. And then the last consideration is they both had their skis on. To be able to do that type of rotation, you would expect skis to come off, and they didn't. So that was kind of the analysis I did with regards to rotational effects. Keep in mind, that is a very, very short period of time between contact and striking the ground.
So you're saying it's nearly impossible that Terry Sanderson hit Miss Paltrow to cause this ski crash?
Well, yes. I mean, I went through all of those scenarios. Unless there is some other descriptor that I am not aware of and did not take into consideration, the only possible way would have been Miss Paltrow striking Mr. Sanderson from behind.
So you're saying this hit from behind is about the only way his ribs could have broken the way they did?
Yes.
So you're saying from a physics standpoint, Terry's injuries would not have occurred if he had hit Miss Paltrow and skied between her skis, for example.
The mere fact of him just striking her, that's not enough
No
energy
prosecution.
being
It's not a criminal
transferred to
case.
the ribs to result in rib fracture.
This is the plaintiff's witness,
And
a plaintiff
neither
expert,
is
which
Ms.
is
Paltrow striking Terry from behind. That
civil
contact in and of
analog
itself
to a
is not going to
prosecution.
result in rib fracture. It's the actual landing on the ground that resulted in the rib fracture.
So the ribs and the way they were fractured are a clear sign that Terry Sanderson was hit from behind.
Yes, I mean, that's what my analysis points to. And like I said before, I analyzed different scenarios and took that into
Pretty blatant
consideration
leading, but
as
okay.
well.
Including the theory of the rotation.
Yes, I did that as well. And there is just no way it could have happened in any other scenario, if you will, other than being struck from behind on the left side, driving your center of gravity to the right, resulting in the fall to the ground to the right side.
Okay, we've been going almost an hour, or about an hour. Why don't we take a short break and continue after the break? Thank you.
Stop it, Derek.
Okay, going off record, the time is 1:10. Okay, back on record, the time is 1:28.
About the concussion that Terry suffered in this ski crash. As a practicing neurologist, what are the typical symptoms of a concussion?
Well, the most common one is headache. And then you can have any number of other symptoms to include disorientation, confusion, not interacting correctly, some irritation, that kind of stuff. And now, obviously, if you have more severe injuries, you can actually have like paralysis, loss of vision, these types of things. But suffice it to say, the most common is a headache, and followed by a number of other things that may or may not accompany the headache.
Yeah, based on what you've read and what you've seen in your exam, did Terry have some of these symptoms?
Yes, he did, and he reported those to me, which were consistent with medical records, and so I had no reason to refute that, but I would certainly defer all those findings to his treaters.
Could you tell the jury, do you think Terry was malingering, magnifying, or faking any of his symptoms?
He didn't appear that way to me, no.
Okay, returning to the concussion, I've got a model here of the brain, and you can see that. Can you tell the jury how a concussion occurs, such as the one Terry suffered in this crash?
Well, a concussion results from the application or a blow to the head in layman's terms, basically an externally applied force application that gets transferred to the brain. You can appreciate that, excuse me for just 1 second. I have one of these too.
Okay.
You can appreciate that the brain lies within the skull table. This is the skull, and that's the hardest bone that we have. But the brain is not hard like bone. It's like a gelatinous, if you were able to ever to hold one, it's like a Jell-O with stuff, carrot sticks or whatever in there. It's a unique consistency, if you will. And I'm talking about a live brain because as part of my residency, we did do brain surgery. So the brain is very, what we call friable, soft. And so it moves, okay? It's a fluid. And so if your head moves or your skull moves, the brain will move into the opposite direction and then have a tendency to rebound back to the other side. And that's based on Newton's first and third law as well. The first law being an object will remain at rest or in constant motion unless acted upon by an externally applied force. And then the third law is for every force application, there's an equal and opposite force application. And so the brain is going to move in opposite direction of the skull. So it's going to make contact with the bony table within the skull. So it's going to compress, then expand, and then compress again. So the French refer to that as a coup, contre coup type of situation. So you can actually get injury from that. And so if you fall face forward, down, the brain is going to compress downwards and then rebound backwards. So you can see that the front part of the brain, and you can appreciate that underneath here, you got all these complex bony structures. So the bottom part of the brain is going to be exposed to that sudden change in direction as well. So you can have symptoms, any number of symptoms from that. So if you have frontal lobe issues, you can have executive dysfunctioning, motivational issues, you can have behavioral issues, and then the subcortical or the underneath side of the brain.
Who cares what the
French
French
memory issues, that kind of stuff. So, and then you can appreciate that all parts of the brain are kind of interconnected. Okay. So you can have issues from those interconnecting fibers being affected as well. So that's what the externally applied force application does to the skull that is transferred to the brain.
Okay. So these forces that the brain is coup contre coup or sloshing around in the skull, that's my term. Did something like that happen to Terry?
Well, yes. I mean, whenever you have a force application, the possibility, certainly you have the coup, which is the direct hit, and then you can have rebounding as well. And you don't know whether you get injury from one or the other. It's generally thought that the contre coup injury tends to be more severe in most individuals, but that's not always the case. But suffice to say, if you have 240 newtons of impact force to the brain, that's certainly enough to cause some dysfunction of the brain. Now, does it guarantee dysfunction? No. You can't. And what I'm saying here is just because you're exposed to an externally applied force to the head of 240 newtons doesn't guarantee brain injury. You have to clinically correlate that with the patient's medical records and the patient himself. So that has to be done first before you go back and do the calculations to see if the force application was proper in both direction and magnitude to result in those injuries.
So when you say clinically correlated, does that how does that affect your opinions?
Well, I will tell you this: you don't have any opinions if you don't have clinical correlation. See what I'm saying? Without the medical aspect of this, you don't know. If someone came up to me and said, well, this person was exposed to 240 newtons of impact force against his head, what's his diagnosis? Well, I couldn't tell you. Not without knowing what the symptoms are, and in the case if that patient has medical records, then you want to peruse the medical records to see how his symptoms progressed over time and how they did not respond to different treatment paradigms that were offered to the patient. So clinical correlation is absolutely critical in assessing these types of situations.
And there was clinical correlation that you observed or saw or determined yourself?
Well, yes, I looked at the medical records, and upon questioning Mr. Sanderson in my office on April 28, 2021, he corroborated the medical records. So he was consistent with the medical records. So I had no reason to dispute either him or the medical records.
Would you say his head injury or concussive injury is permanent at this point?
Well, that has always been the issue here. You know, whether or not the concussion is permanent or temporary. The fact that his symptoms have lasted from a neurological sense greater than 18 months, we regard that as being permanent. And you can see that as of 6 years after the event when I saw him, he still had these symptoms. So his symptoms have been indicative of a permanent condition.
A permanent brain injury?
Yes, I mean, he has a mild TBI or a permanent concussive disorder.
Okay. You mentioned some things involved with executive function and other things, and he's exhibited all of those problems too.
Yeah, I mean, he does. Now, to what extent, I can't tell you. I wasn't going to provide any opinions with regards to his level of functioning as it relates to this mild TBI, but he does have the mild TBI. But
in addition,
to which I'm not going to comment on.
The defendant doesn't show up in a civil case. You can ask that they be defaulted for failure to appear,
before and after,
and then set it for prove up and skip the whole liability.
In
fight.
this collision, how would you explain that Ms. Paltrow has fewer symptoms of problems, if at all, from this ski crash?
Well, first of all, I haven't reviewed any medical records for Ms. Paltrow, so I do not. I cannot opine on that, other than by falling on top of him, he provides a cushioning effect against her in the ground. So from a force application, an externally applied force application standpoint, less force was applied to her than to him.
So is another way of saying Terry Sanderson provided a cushion? He took the force for her fall?
Yeah, in essence, I mean, basically he was like a cushion, if you will.
And earlier we discussed before and after witnesses being clinically important for a diagnosis of concussion and TBI. That's lasted longer than 18 months. How would you describe these before and after witnesses, such as his daughters or his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend?
Well, they certainly describe a change in his overall makeup from before and after this event. Now, how it affects him directly, once again, I'm going to defer to others for that, but certainly there is before and after witness testimony reflecting that.
And those before and after witnesses are important to determine the nature and extent of his injuries?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I mean, like I said before, whenever you have this type of situation or this type of patient that presents to you, often it is the witnessed account that is important.
I don't think that would happen because if that video existed,
Let's talk about Terry's pre-existing medical condition.
this thing probably would be resolved.
It's been brought up in that one exhibit with the x-rays or radiology that was reported shortly after the crash, within a few days, that he had NPA and enlarged ventricles. You recall that, correct?
Yes, NPH.
Or sorry, NPH. I wrote it wrong. My spelling was incorrect. NPH. What is the significance of NPH being a condition he had prior to the crash, and how it affects your opinions today? If you could explain that to the jury.
Normal pressure hydrocephalus is a condition that is manifested clinically by a triad: dementia, ataxia, which means loss of balance, and incontinence. And it develops slowly over time. And we see this from a radiological standpoint as enlarged ventricles on either the CT scan, but more appropriately the MRI. And so when you see this in that clinical setting, then you want to do one of two things, or preferably both. You do a spinal tap to see if you have increased intracranial pressure on the spinal tap, and we have manometers that we attach to the needle going into the
Definitely
back
the afternoon,
to measure that
maybe the
pressure.
morning. No
10
naughty
millimeters of water. And
I'm on my best behavior.
if it is
All G-rated
elevated,
over here.
i.e. greater than 200 millimeters of water, then the treatment of choice is to actually do a burr hole in the head and stick a catheter into the lateral ventricle, and then trace a drain all the way down through the neck into his stomach, if you will, abdomen, to drain off excess
What are you
spinal
talking
fluid,
about?
i.e. reducing the pressure. And we call that an
I know a lot of people
intraventricular
past
shunt
70 just
replacement,
fine.
which I have done a number of times in the past. And so that is the treatment for it. But you don't want to do that unless you don't do it based on just the radiological findings. You want to have the clinical. Any intracranial image has to be clinically correlated with the patient. So if you don't have those symptoms, then you don't want to be putting holes in people's heads without having symptoms.
She's well beyond her
in this
OnlyFans
particular
years.
case, he did not have
I get your point,
the
but
diagnosis of normal
that's not a
pressure
viable
hydrocephalus
alternative for her.
before this fall, even though he had a suggestion of that in the differential from a radiological standpoint. So that's where the clinical correlation comes into play.
So he did not have the 3 clinical symptoms of NPH. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, dementia, ataxia, and incontinence are pretty noteworthy symptoms to have, and these people tend to present as they develop over time. They tend to present to medical attention rather quickly, if you know what I mean.
Okay. So the ski crash injuries he suffered, they're not attributable to his findings radiologically of NPH. Is that correct?
That's correct. No, they're not.
Now, I'd like to turn you to the defense experts. You've read some or all of, I think most of the reports of the defense experts. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Some of them were quite brief. Isn't that correct?
Well, yes. In fact, I do like brevity, but yes, they got to the point.
Okay. And you've reviewed the
Sorry, Lawrence. Sorry, Lawrence. I don't mean to interrupt. I'm trying to figure out a good time to interrupt here, but I just want to register an objection to any opinions that Dr. Bain could have provided in his deposition and did not, and you can proceed.
Okay. Well, since your deposition, you've reviewed the defendant's disclosure of Irving share. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, just the disclosure. I haven't reviewed any report or anything from them.
Okay. It's our understanding that he's a biomechanical expert. Is that your understanding?
Well, that's what's been told to me.
Sounds like we're getting into a new area. That'll be a good time to take a recess until tomorrow at 9 a.m. So thank you. Remember to please keep the court's admonition not to do any of your own research, not to discuss the case with anyone, avoid seeing, reading, or listening to any news reports about the case. Have a nice evening.
I have one simple request, and that is to have sharks with frickin' laser beams attached to their heads.
Well, there you have it. Dr. Evil. I think Dr. Evil's doing a nice job. I think their experts have done a nice job. I really, Chief Spread Eagle's the one I really can't deal with. I think Clark Kent's just not good. He's just not good. But he's more likable. I think the plaintiff's attorneys, despite themselves, have put together a good case. They've done a lot. They got good experts. They did a lot of good trial prep. They are horrible with questioning witnesses. And the opening statement was god awful. Having said that, they have an independent witness saying it's her fault. They have a biomechanical expert right here saying that that's the most reasonable mechanism of injury in a plausible way. They've got Dr. Fung there or whatever. She was pretty good. Let's go snippy, but that's all right. Kind of a cutie. I thought 80s hair, Sam Goldstein was just fantastic. I thought he knocked it out of the park. And I thought their neurologist was a complete snooze, but competent and reasonable. You add all that up, they're making a decent case. A prima facie case means you did it. It's sort of like, view it this way. If the defense said, we're not going to put on a case, we're not going to defend the case, I think the plaintiff wins. Now, I can be convinced otherwise. I mean, all it would take is Gwyneth Paltrow to get up there and say, this didn't happen this way, be very credible. He ran into me. This is nonsense. For example, or they have the video and it shows that he ran into her. That destroys everything here. I don't think that these attorneys would produce this evidence or go this far if they had a video that contradicted all of it. It's just too stupid. But you know what? Given some of the things they've done, it's possible. Tomorrow I'm definitely gonna do the afternoon. Morning's a little dicey. So I may or may not. It depends on how things shake out. I'll figure it out. I'll let you know. I'll send out the bat signal when I know. But I definitely think after lunch tomorrow to the end, I should be around. Morning, not so sure. But it's been interesting. And although I absolutely can't stand him, he just gets my blood up. I really cannot deal with that drama queen freaking attorney for the defense. I must admit he's the best for the stream because he is so out of line. It's entertaining. It truly is. I can't believe the things he gets away with. I can't believe what the judge allows from him. I think the judge is a nice guy. I don't think he's a dumb guy. I think he calls it straight with the plaintiff's side in a very normal way. And I just think he's overindulgent with the defense in this case. Specifically Chief Spread Eagle. He loves him. This guy, this guy has shown absolute disdain for the court and process. He rules on objections himself. He does not seem to understand the process. He cuts people off in terms of timing. That's a judge's thing to do. Judge can say, well, hey, this is what we have allotted. You got to move it along. Opposing counsel can't do that. If that's the rule, then we'd all do it to each other. Guess what? Your time's up. Cut it off. Do that every time someone has an effective witness. Duh. That's why they can't do that. You need an impartial neutral to make those calls. That's what they're there for. If they're not going to make those calls, then we don't need them. We don't need them. We'll just call our own fouls. Oh, okay. We'll see what sort of justice falls out of that scenario. Anyway, good time. Good times. Fascinating case. I am dying to hear what he says. They're saying he's got these issues and stuff. I think it's going to hurt. I think they've made a prima facie case, but if he's going to say I don't remember any of it and I don't know anything, that's going to be hard to stomach. Even though it's plausibly true, that one's going to be a tough one to buy. Maybe he'll say I remember some of it, but it's hazy. That's more plausible. But if he just says I don't know anything about it, it's going to be hard for the plaintiff to meet their burden. And then the other big one is the only two people we know for sure know what happened is Ms. Paltrow and the plaintiff. So I'm dying to hear that. All these experts, given that what the information they have presented very good, reasoned, plausible theories. But it's still premised on the facts that they've been handed. All these experts are I think, make a lot of sense, but they're assuming that she hit him. They have to. There's nothing wrong with that. They're viewing it through that prism, because those are the facts that are before them. This one is sort of like really getting into that fact. He's saying, her theory doesn't make sense biomechanically versus his theory. And that's the only one where he's sort of externally coming in, and he's the only expert that can. I'm getting too deep into the woods here. You get my point. I still think it's sort of an interesting case, and I'm most interested in just plain factually, who's at fault? And I don't see any grand conspiracy. I'm just saying I haven't come to a conclusion because all of the evidence isn't in yet. That's just the fair way that I see it. We have an independent witness who I thought was credible enough, but not perfect. And he wasn't right there. He was there. So he had a view of it. I don't think his testimony is irrelevant at all. I don't think he's, he seemed credible, but not so credible that if somebody else came along and said, no, it happened this way and here's good reasons, that I couldn't be convinced otherwise. So, that's where we are. That's where we are with it. So I'll see. I don't know about the morning. I do know about the afternoon. Thank y'all for coming out. I appreciate it. And I will see you all soon.